Every head in the dining room turned. Monica felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the curiosity, the instant assessment of her thrift store clothes against the backdrop of luxury. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't move. The manager blinked twice, looking from her worn clothes to the gleaming Steinway grand piano in the corner. Play what for tips? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She stood outside the restaurant where her ex-husband was celebrating his engagement, holding nothing but car keys and $37, unaware that in 20 minutes, she would remind the world what real power sounds like. Monica Richardson pressed her face against the cool glass of Lou Bernardine Dallas, watching the man who once promised her forever raise a champagne flute to toast his new life. The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors where designer heels clicked in perfect rhythm. Except for her worn sneakers that squeaked against the polished stone like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. Richard sat at table 12, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his Armani suit fitting like it was sewn directly onto his body. Across from him, a blonde woman young enough to be his daughter giggled at something he whispered, her engagement ring catching the light like a small star. The same finger where Monica's wedding band had lived for 15 years now bore nothing but the pale mark of what used to be. Her stomach growled, a sharp reminder of why she was here. $37. That's what remained after paying the electric bill, after buying Emma's school supplies, after choosing between gas and groceries. Again, the restaurant's manager stood behind the hostess station, a thin man with kind eyes and worry lines. Monica straightened her shoulders, smoothed down her thrift store blazer, and pushed through the heavy glass doors. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this sounds crazy, but I was wondering, can I play for tips?" The manager blinked twice, looking from her worn clothes to the gleaming Steinway grand piano in the corner. "Play what for tips?" "Piano." The word came out stronger than she felt. "I can play piano." Behind her, she heard Richard's familiar laugh echo across the dining room. The same laugh that once made her heart race when they were college sweethearts in Alabama, now making her hands shake as conversations began to quiet around them. The manager's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like pity. "Ma'am, this is a five-star establishment. We don't typically. Please." The desperation in her voice surprised even her. "I won't disturb anyone. Just background music. Whatever you think is fair." The blonde at table 12 leaned forward, whispering something to Richard. His head turned, and Monica watched his face change as recognition hit him like cold water. His confident smile twisted into something cruel. Well, Richard called out, his voice carrying across the restaurant like a challenge. "Look what the cat dragged in." Every head in the dining room turned. Monica felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the curiosity, the instant assessment of her thrift store clothes against the backdrop of luxury. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't move. "Monica, darling," Richard continued, standing now, his napkin falling to the floor. "Still begging for handouts, I see. Some things never change." The blonde giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "Is this her? The ex-wife you told me about? The one who lost everything because she never learned how to be useful," Richard finished, his eyes locked on Monica's face. "Always thought she was too good for real work." Have you ever walked into a room knowing you didn't belong, but needing to be there anyway? Tell me about a time you had to face your biggest fear. Monica's fingers twitched at her sides, muscle memory from years of practice suddenly flooding back. The manager looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding in his restaurant. "Sir, please," he said quietly, "if you could keep your voice down." "Oh, let her play," Richard said, waving his hand dismissively. "I'd love to see what my worthless ex-wife thinks she can do with those hands now. Might be entertaining." The restaurant fell silent, except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Monica looked at the piano, its ebony surface reflecting the chaos of the room. Whispered conversations, raised eyebrows, the flash of phone cameras capturing what they assumed would be another viral video of public humiliation. Her feet moved before her mind could stop them. Each step toward the piano bench felt like walking toward a cliff, but she kept going. Behind her, she heard Richard's voice again. This should be good. Monica always was full of big dreams and no talent to back them up. She sat down at the bench, her hands hovering over the keys like prayer. The ivory was smooth, familiar, calling to something deep in her chest that had been sleeping for too long. As she approached the manager's desk earlier, Richard's laughter had echoed across the dining room. The same laugh that once made her heart race, now making her hands shake as she whispered words that would change everything. "Excuse me, can I play for tips?" The laughter started small, a snicker from table 12, a whisper from the hostess, but grew like wildfire until the entire restaurant was watching the desperate ex-wife make a fool of herself. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced, standing with a champagne glass raised like he was hosting a show, "my ex-wife Monica is about to treat us to what I'm sure will be a memorable performance. She always did love being the center of attention." The blonde, Cassandra, Monica remembered now from the society pages, clapped her manicured hands together. "Oh, how fun. I love dinner theater." Phones emerged from purses and jacket pockets, their screens glowing like modern torches held by a digital mob. The manager wrung his hands, caught between stopping a scene and protecting his upscale clientele from embarrassment. Monica's hands found the keys, her fingertips recognizing the familiar weight and spacing despite 3 years of silence. The Steinway grand piano sat in the corner like a sleeping giant, its ebony surface reflecting the chaos of the room. Whispered conversations, raised eyebrows, the flash of cameras capturing what they assumed would be another viral video of public disaster. "This is actually happening," someone at table 8 whispered, loudly enough for half the room to hear. "She's really going to try to play." "Poor thing," came another voice, reduced to begging for tips in front of her ex-husband. How humiliating. Richard leaned back in his chair, his arm draped possessively around Cassandra's shoulders. Monica recognized the gesture, territorial marking that he used to do with her during their early marriage, stirring unwanted memories of his touch, of nights when his hands would trace her spine while she played soft melodies in their bedroom. "You know," Richard said, his voice carrying across the restaurant, "Monica used to tell everyone she was going to be a concert pianist. Carnegie Hall, she'd say, recording contracts. The whole fantasy." Cassandra's laugh tinkled like expensive wind chimes. "Really? And now she's here, playing for tips? That's actually kind of sad." "Sad." Richard's smile turned sharp. "It's reality. Some people never learn the difference between dreams and delusion." The hostess, a young woman with kind eyes, stepped closer to the piano. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to do this? With all the attention?" Monica looked up at her, seeing genuine concern instead of mockery. "I'm sure. What song are you going to play?" the hostess asked quietly. "Something they'll remember," Monica replied, her voice steady for the first time since walking through those doors. "When someone you once loved tries to destroy you publicly, how do you respond? With anger, dignity, or something else entirely?" Behind her, Richard's voice rose again. "The funniest part is, she actually believes she has talent. 15 years of marriage, and I never heard her play anything worth listening to. Always plinking away on that old, upright piano we had in the spare room, thinking she was creating art." The room buzzed with energy now, not the refined atmosphere of expensive dining, but the raw excitement of witnessing potential carnage. Servers paused with trays balanced on their hands. The sommelier stopped mid-pour. Even the kitchen staff had begun peering through the service window. Monica's muscle memory took over as her fingers found their position. Her back straightened, her wrists lifted to the proper angle, her breathing slowed to match the rhythm she could already hear in her head. These were movements her body had performed thousands of times before Richard convinced her that music was a waste of time, before marriage and motherhood buried her dreams under years of practical living. "Here we go," Richard said with obvious glee. The grand finale of Monica's delusions. Cassandra pulled out her phone, angling it toward the piano. This is definitely going on my Instagram story. My followers won't believe this. The restaurant held its breath. Waiters frozen mid-step, conversation suspended, silverware quiet against china. All eyes focused on the woman in the thrift store blazer, sitting at a piano worth more than most people's cars. Monica closed her eyes for just a moment, remembering the weight of her teacher's hands guiding her fingers when she was 7 years old. Remembering the scholarship letter from the Alabama School of Fine Arts. Remembering the acceptance to the summer program that would have taken her to New York, the one Richard convinced her to decline because we have a wedding to plan. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Richard, her fingers poised above the keys like weapons ready to fire. Her fingers touched the keys for the first time in 3 years, and the room fell silent. Not from respect, but from anticipation of disaster. What they didn't know was that some things, once learned in blood and tears, can never be unlearned. The first chord she played wasn't just music. It was a declaration of war against everyone who had counted her out. The sound that emerged from the Steinway wasn't tentative or shaky. It was pure, clean, and so unexpectedly professional that the woman at table 6 actually dropped her fork. Monica's fingers moved across the keys like water, finding its path, each note flowing into the next with precision that spoke of countless hours of practice, of dreams deferred but never destroyed. She started with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she'd mastered at 16, one that required both technical skill and emotional depth. The melody rose through the restaurant like smoke, finding every corner, every heart, every memory that had ever been touched by beauty. Richard's confident smirk began to crack around the edges. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath, leaning forward in his chair. This wasn't the fumbling amateur performance he'd expected. This was something else entirely. Cassandra's phone wavered in her hand as she tried to maintain her recording angle. Her Instagram story caption had been ready. "OMG, you guys, watching my fiancé's pathetic ex-wife embarrass herself at dinner." Now her thumb hovered over the delete button, uncertainty creeping across her perfectly contoured features. The dining room transformed around Monica as she played. Conversations didn't just stop, they became impossible. The music demanded attention, commanded respect, insisted on being heard. Her body moved with the melody in ways Richard remembered from their courtship. The sensual sway of her shoulders, the arch of her back, the way her face softened into something almost sacred when she was truly connected to the music. At table 3, an elderly man closed his eyes and smiled, transported by the familiar piece to memories of his late wife, who had played piano in their parlor 50 years ago. The young couple by the window stopped arguing about money and reached for each other's hands. Even the skeptical business executives at the corner booth found themselves leaning forward, their quarterly reports forgotten. "Jesus," Richard whispered, his face going pale as recognition dawned. "She's actually what?" Cassandra snapped, her voice sharp with growing anxiety. "Actually good." The admission came out like a confession he hadn't meant to make. The hostess moved closer to the piano, her kind eyes bright with amazement. She'd worked at Le Bernardin for 3 years and heard plenty of background music, but nothing like this. Nothing that made her chest tight with emotion she couldn't name. Monica's fingers found the more complex passages of the piece, the parts that separated amateur players from trained musicians. Her left hand carried the deep, rolling bass notes while her right hand danced through the melodic line with a lightness that seemed impossible. This was Carnegie Hall-level playing, conservatory training on full display, years of discipline and natural talent converging into something magical. The manager appeared at her shoulder, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional interest. He'd hired plenty of background musicians over the years, wedding singers, acoustic guitarists, jazz trios. None of them had ever commanded a room like this woman in the warm blazer. By the third measure, phones weren't recording mockery anymore. They were capturing something else entirely. Comments began appearing in real time on social media posts. "Holy shit, this woman can actually play. Where did she train? Someone sign her immediately." Richard's hand tightened around his champagne flute until his knuckles went white. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. He'd wanted humiliation, public confirmation that Monica was as worthless as he'd spent years telling her she was. Instead, he was watching his ex-wife remind everyone in the room, including himself, of exactly what he'd thrown away. "She never played like this for me," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. "Not once in 15 years. Cassandra's perfect composure began to crack. Maybe she just got lucky. One good song doesn't make someone a musician. But even as she said it, they both knew that wasn't true. What they were witnessing wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was mastery, the kind that comes from years of dedicated practice and innate musical intelligence. This was the sound of a woman remembering who she was before marriage and motherhood, and Richard's constant criticism convinced her to forget. Have you ever had a moment where your hidden talent shocked everyone? Will you prove the doubters wrong with pure skill? The melody built toward its climax. Monica's entire body engaged with the music now. Her feet worked the pedals with subtle precision. Her breathing matched the phrase structure. Her heart rate synchronized with the tempo. She wasn't just playing the piano. She was conducting an emotional experience for everyone in the room. At table 12, Richard's face had gone white as recognition dawned that his worthless ex-wife was about to become famous. By the third measure, phones weren't recording mockery anymore. They were capturing something else entirely. And Richard's face had gone white as recognition dawned. His worthless ex-wife was about to become famous. She played like her life depended on it, because for the first time in years, it actually did. The nocturne reached its emotional peak, and Monica's fingers danced through the most technically challenging passage with an ease that made it look effortless. But technique alone couldn't explain what was happening in that dining room. This was music infused with pain, with years of suppressed dreams, with the desperate hunger of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Tips began appearing in the small crystal bowl beside the piano. Not loose change or pity dollars, but $20 bills, 50s, even a $100 bill from the businessman at table 9. The hostess had to empty the bowl twice as more people approached, drawn by music that seemed to reach into their chests and rearrange something fundamental. Richard's attempts to regain control grew more desperate and louder. "Don't be fooled by one decent performance," he called out, his voice cutting through the melody like a knife. "This woman lived off my money for 15 years, contributing nothing, producing nothing of value." But his words fell flat now, competing with music that told a different story entirely. Every note Monica played contradicted his narrative. Every phrase revealed the lie he'd been selling about her worth. "Richard, please," Cassandra hissed, tugging at his sleeve. "Everyone's staring at us." "Good," he snapped, jerking away from her touch. "Let them stare. Let them see what kind of manipulative performance she's capable of." The crowd gathering around the piano included other diners now, people who had finished their meals but couldn't bring themselves to leave. The music held them captive, and more importantly, it held their phones. Social media posts multiplied by the minute, videos spreading across platforms with captions like, "You won't believe what happened at dinner tonight," and "This woman just destroyed a room with one song." Monica's awareness of being watched had shifted from embarrassing scrutiny to intoxicating recognition. For the first time in years, she felt the power that came from doing something she was genuinely gifted at, something that made people stop everything else and pay attention. The sensation was almost physical, a warmth spreading through her chest, a confidence building in her shoulders, a connection between her body and the instrument that felt like coming home. The restaurant manager approached Richard's table, his expression diplomatic but firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. You're disturbing our other guests." "Disturbing them?" Richard's laugh came out bitter and sharp. "She's the one making a spectacle of herself, turning your restaurant into some kind of street performance venue." "Actually," the manager said, glancing toward the piano where Monica had begun transitioning into a second piece, "we're getting requests for her information. Several guests want to know if she performs at private events." Cassandra's champagne glass trembled in her hand. "This is insane. She's a nobody. A divorced woman playing for tips. A divorced woman who's about to trend on social media. The hostess added quietly, showing them her phone screen, where hashtag #PianoWomanDallas was already gaining traction. Richard's frustrated desire to possess what he could no longer control was written across his face as he watched Monica command the room with nothing but her talent and determination. The same hands he dismissed as useless were now creating something that held an entire restaurant spellbound. "I need to stop this," he muttered, standing abruptly. "Richard, don't," Cassandra warned, but he was already moving, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered around the piano. What would you do if your ex tried to sabotage your comeback moment? Fight back or rise above? Monica felt his approach before she saw him. The familiar tension that always preceded one of Richard's attempts to assert dominance. But she didn't stop playing. If anything, her fingers moved with even more precision. Her back straightened with more dignity. Her connection to the music deepened until she and the piano seemed to become one instrument. "Enough," Richard said, his voice loud enough to carry over the melody. "This little performance is over." But Monica had moved into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor now, a piece that required not just technical skill but emotional fearlessness. The dark, complex harmonies filled the space like a storm, and Richard's interruption felt small and powerless against the musical force she had unleashed. The crowd that had gathered wasn't dispersing at Richard's command. Instead, they were growing larger, and several people had their phones pointed at him now, capturing his desperate attempt to derail something beautiful. When she launched into a piece Richard recognized, the song she played on their wedding night, his fiancée's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor, and Monica's smile turned dangerous. Some songs are just music, others are weapons, and she had just loaded her most devastating ammunition. The opening notes of Clair de Lune floated through the restaurant, but this wasn't the gentle, dreamy version most people knew. Monica's interpretation was darker, more complex, infused with the weight of broken promises and shattered dreams. This was the piece she played on their wedding night 15 years ago, when Richard had slow danced with her in their honeymoon suite while she played the hotel's baby grand piano. Richard went rigid in his chair, his face cycling through emotions he couldn't control: recognition, nostalgia, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to regret. "Turn it off," he whispered to Cassandra, but his voice carried no authority now. "Make her stop." Cassandra sat frozen, her shattered champagne glass forgotten as crystal fragments caught the light around her feet. She was watching her fiancé come apart in real time, his confident facade cracking with each note that carried memories she had no part in. Monica's fingers moved through the familiar melody with the confidence of ownership. This was her song, had always been her song, even when Richard convinced her to stop playing it because it reminded him too much of the old days. Now she understood why he'd really wanted her to forget it, because it was evidence of who she used to be, proof that she'd once been someone worth celebrating. The crowd around the piano had grown larger, drawn by the raw emotion pouring from the instrument. The melody soared through the room like smoke, finding every corner, every heart, every memory that had ever been broken by love. And for 3 minutes and 47 seconds, Monica owned every soul in that space. At table 12, Cassandra leaned forward, her voice sharp with panic. "This is ridiculous. It's just a piano song. Why are you acting like?" "Like what?" Richard's words came out strangled. "Like I'm watching the woman I destroyed remember how powerful she used to be." The admission hung between them, raw and unintended. Cassandra's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the fear creeping across her features. She was 28 years old, beautiful, wealthy in her own right, but she was watching her older fiancé come undone over his ex-wife's piano playing. Monica reached the bridge of the song, the section that had always made Richard hold her closer during their dance. Her left hand carried the deep, rolling bass notes that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than the piano, while her right hand wove the melodic line with a delicacy that made the air itself seem fragile. "Do you have a song that takes you back to a specific person? One that can still make you feel everything all over again. The hostess had given up pretending to work. She stood transfixed beside the piano, tears forming in her eyes as the music unlocked emotions she kept carefully buried. Around the dining room, similar scenes played out. The elderly couple at table 4 holding hands across their dessert plates. The business executives at the corner booth completely forgetting their merger discussion. The young woman by herself at table 2 openly crying into her wine glass. "She's ruining everything," Cassandra said, but her voice lacked conviction. Even she could feel the power of what was happening, the way Monica's performance was transforming the entire atmosphere of the room. Richard couldn't look away from his ex-wife's hands on the keys. These were the same hands that had once touched him with such tenderness, that had played this exact piece while he whispered promises about forever against her neck. The same hands he'd later dismissed as worthless, incapable of contributing anything meaningful to their marriage. "She never played it like this," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the music. "Not for me." "What are you talking about?" Cassandra demanded. "The emotion, the power. She's playing it like she owns it now, and she did own it. Every note, every pause, every subtle dynamic change belonged to Monica in a way that Richard was finally beginning to understand. This wasn't just technical proficiency. This was musical storytelling, the kind that comes from living through pain and finding a way to transform it into something beautiful. The climax of the piece built like a wave. Monica's entire body engaged with the music now. Her shoulders moved with the phrase structure. Her breathing synchronized with the melody. Her feet worked the pedals with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering the instrument's full capabilities. When the final notes began to fade, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, pregnant with emotion and recognition, and the kind of awe that only comes from witnessing genuine artistry. The applause started slowly, hesitant, as if people weren't sure whether they were allowed to respond to something so intimate. But it built quickly, becoming thunderous, until the entire restaurant was on its feet, except for Richard, who sat frozen, staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. As the last note faded, silence stretched like a held breath, until the applause erupted, and Monica realized the entire restaurant was on its feet. Everyone except Richard, who sat frozen, staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. The applause thundered through the restaurant like a freight train, but Monica barely heard it. She sat at the piano bench, her hands still positioned over the keys, watching Richard's face crumble like old paper in the rain. The standing ovation stretched on for what felt like forever. Grown men wiped their eyes with cloth napkins. Women clutched their hearts. The business executives who'd been arguing about quarterly profits just minutes before now stood clapping like their lives depended on it. "Holy shit," someone whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Where has this woman been hiding?" Richard finally found his voice, but it came out cracked and desperate. "Sit down, all of you. It's just one song. Don't let her manipulate you with cheap, emotional tricks." But nobody was listening to him anymore. The crowd pressed closer to the piano, bills flooding the crystal bowl faster than anyone could count them. 20s, 50s, hundreds. More money than Monica had seen in months, all because she'd remembered how to be herself. A woman in diamonds approached, her voice breathless with excitement. "Do you perform at private parties? My daughter's wedding is next month, and we need—" "She doesn't perform anywhere," Richard interrupted, standing so fast his chair scraped against the marble floor. "She's a nobody, a divorced woman living off scraps." The woman's expression shifted from interest to disgust, but not at Monica. "Excuse me? Who exactly are you to speak for her? I'm her ex-husband. I know exactly what she's worth." "Based on what I just heard," the woman replied coldly, "you clearly don't." Cassandra tugged at Richard's sleeve, her voice urgent. "Richard, please. Everyone's recording this. It's going to be all over social media." She was right. Phones were everywhere now, capturing not just Monica's triumph, but Richard's meltdown. The hashtag #PinAWomanDallas was trending upward, and most of the comments weren't about Monica's performance. They were about her pathetic ex-husband trying to tear down her moment of glory. The restaurant manager appeared beside Monica, his earlier hesitation replaced by pure business instinct. "Ma'am, I don't know your story, but I know talent when I hear it. Would you be interested in a regular position? Weekend evenings, full pay plus tips." Monica looked up at him, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "What kind of pay?" $2,000 a weekend to start. More if you draw crowds like this." Richard's bitter laugh cut through the conversation. "2,000? For her? You got to be kidding." "Sir," the manager said, turning to face Richard with professional calm, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're creating a disturbance." "A disturbance?" Richard's voice rose to a near shout. "She's the one who turned your restaurant into a circus." But even as he spoke, more people were approaching Monica. A wedding planner slipped her business card into the crystal bowl. A hotel events coordinator scribbled his number on a napkin. An elderly man pressed a $50 bill into her hand and whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in 20 years. Have you ever watched someone you underestimated completely change the game? How did it make you feel?" Monica stood from the piano bench, and the crowd moved back to give her space, not out of fear, but out of respect. She was no longer the desperate woman in thrift store clothes begging to play for tips. Something fundamental had shifted in the last 20 minutes, and everyone in the room could feel it. "Richard," she said, her voice carrying across the restaurant with new authority, "you asked what I was worth. I think we just got our answer." His face went purple with rage and humiliation. "This changes nothing, Monica. You're still broke, still living in that apartment, still raising our daughter alone While you what?" Monica interrupted. "While you celebrate your engagement to someone young enough to be your daughter? While you pretend that money makes you valuable when all it really makes you is pathetic?" Cassandra's champagne glass hit the floor with a crash that echoed through the sudden silence. Money talks, but talent screams, and tonight, Monica's talent was loud enough to wake the dead. The crystal bowl beside the piano overflowed with cash and business cards. Monica counted quickly in her head. At least $800 in tips, plus the job offer, plus a dozen potential private bookings. More money than she'd seen in months, earned in less than 30 minutes. Richard watched her count, his face cycling through emotions he couldn't control. "You think this changes anything? You think one good night makes up for 15 years of being useless?" "Useless?" The word came out of Monica like a knife. "I raised your daughter. I kept your house. I supported your career while mine died in that spare room you turned into your home office. You had no career to kill," Richard shot back. "Playing piano isn't a career, it's a hobby. I provided the real income, the real stability. You provided control," Monica interrupted, her voice rising. "You provided reasons why I couldn't audition for symphony positions, why I couldn't teach private lessons, why I couldn't even play at church because it would embarrass you if people knew your wife needed to work." The crowd around them had grown quiet, sensing they were witnessing something deeper than a simple argument between ex-spouses. This was years of suppressed truth finally breaking free, and nobody wanted to miss a word. Cassandra stood beside Richard like a decoration, her engagement ring catching the light, but her face pale with growing understanding. "Richard, what is she talking about?" "She's talking about ancient history," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Water under the bridge. Ancient history." Monica's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "You mean like the recording contract I was offered right after college? The one you convinced me to turn down because we were getting married?" The elderly man at table 3 leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. He'd been in the music industry for 40 years, and he recognized the signs of wasted talent when he saw them. "Or the teaching position at the conservatory?" Monica continued. "The one you said would take too much time away from being a proper wife." "Every decision we made together," Richard protested, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "We..." Monica's voice rose until it carried to every corner of the restaurant. "When exactly did I get a vote, Richard? We moved us to Texas so you could take that promotion. When you decided we couldn't afford the piano lessons I wanted to give. When you convinced me that my dreams were impractical while yours were essential." The hostess had stopped pretending to work entirely. She stood transfixed, watching a woman reclaim 15 years of silenced truth in real time. "You made me small," Monica said, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. "You convinced me I was nothing, had nothing to offer, brought nothing of value to the marriage. And I believed you. For 15 years, I believed you." Cassandra's voice came out small and shaky. "Richard, is this true?" Richard's silence was answer enough. He stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed narrative about his worthless ex-wife crumble under the weight of truth and witnesses. When someone tries to make you smaller, do you fight back immediately, or does it take time to realize what's happening? "But the funny thing about truth," Monica continued, "is that it doesn't disappear just because someone convinces you to forget it. It waits. It grows. It gets stronger in the dark until the day it finally breaks free." She gestured toward the overflowing tip bowl, toward the business cards scattered around the piano, toward the crowd of people still staring at her with newfound respect. "This is who I always was, Richard. This is what you threw away when you decided I wasn't worth investing in. When you chose to tear me down instead of build me up. When you picked a young trophy wife over the woman who loved you enough to sacrifice everything for your comfort." The restaurant manager stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Ma'am, I hate to interrupt, but there's a gentleman here who says he represents a talent agency. He'd like to speak with you." Behind him stood a well-dressed man with silver hair and kind eyes, holding a business card between manicured fingers. "Miss Richardson, I'm David Chun from Premier Entertainment. I caught your performance on social media. It's already gone viral, and I'd like to discuss some opportunities." Richard's jaw dropped. "Viral? What do you mean viral?" The talent agent held up his phone, showing a video that had already been viewed 50,000 times. "Your ex-wife's performance has been shared across 6 platforms in the last half hour. The comments are, well, let's just say the public loves a comeback story." As if summoned by his words, Monica's phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media mentions, all flooding in faster than she could process them. "This is insane," Cassandra whispered, staring at her own phone screen. "She's trending. Like actually trending." Monica looked down at the device in her hands, watching her old life disappear in real time as something new began to take its place. When your comeback gets captured on camera, the whole world becomes your audience and your judge. Monica's phone buzzed so violently it nearly jumped out of her hands. Notifications poured in like water through a broken dam. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all showing the same video of her performance from dozens of different angles. "Look at this," the talent agent said, scrolling through his tablet. 43,000 views in 30 minutes. The comments are incredible. "Who is this woman? Someone sign her immediately. This gave me chills. Her ex-husband is a fool." That last comment hit Richard like a physical blow. He grabbed the tablet, reading through the flood of responses, his face growing paler with each scroll. "This is temporary," he said desperately. "Internet fame disappears as fast as it comes. Next week, nobody will remember her name." But even as he spoke, more people were entering the restaurant. Not diners, but social media followers who had tracked down the location from the viral videos. The hostess looked overwhelmed as a line began forming outside the door. "Ma'am," a teenager with purple hair called out, holding her phone up for a selfie. "Can I get a picture? Your story is so inspiring." "What story?" Monica asked, genuinely confused. The girl's eyes widened. "You haven't seen? Someone found your background. About how you gave up a scholarship to get married. How your husband made you stop playing piano. How you're raising your daughter alone now. It's like the ultimate comeback tale." Monica felt the blood drain from her face. "How do they know all that?" The talent agent grimaced. "Social media is thorough. Once something goes viral, people start digging. They found your old college records, your daughter's school information, even your apartment complex." Panic fluttered in Monica's chest. "My daughter?" "They found information about Emma. Nothing dangerous," the agent assured her quickly. "Just that she exists." "But Monica, you need to understand. Your life is about to change completely. This level of attention doesn't just go away." Richard seized on her fear like a weapon. See, this is what happens when you make a spectacle of yourself. Now strangers are invading our daughter's privacy, all because you needed to feed your ego. My ego. Monica whirled on him, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. You're the one who announced to the entire restaurant that I was worthless. You're the one who invited this humiliation by making sure everyone knew exactly what you thought of me. Cassandra scrolled through the comments on her own phone, her face growing paler with each line she read. Oh God, Richard. They're not just talking about her. They're talking about us too. She held up her phone, showing tweets that made Richard's blood run cold. This man really left a woman with that level of talent for a basic blonde? The audacity. Imagine being so insecure you convince your wife to give up her dreams. This guy is trash. Someone needs to find this ex-husband and show him what the internet thinks of men who destroy their wives' careers. Richard, they know who we are, Cassandra whispered, her voice thick with panic. They found our engagement announcement. They know where we work. People are already leaving comments on my Instagram. Have you ever had your worst moment broadcast for the world to see? How do you handle sudden, unwanted fame? The restaurant manager approached their table with obvious discomfort. Sir, I'm sorry, but we're getting calls from news outlets. People are asking about the piano woman incident. This is becoming a media situation we're not equipped to handle. News outlets. Richard's voice cracked. What kind of news outlets? Local morning shows, entertainment blogs, a few national programs. They want to interview both the performer and, well, you. The reality of his situation began to sink in. Richard had worked his entire career to build a respectable public image, successful businessman, community leader, pillar of society. Now he was becoming internet famous as the villain in someone else's comeback story. I need to leave, he said suddenly, standing from his chair. Cassandra, we're going. But Cassandra remained seated, staring at her phone with growing horror. Richard, look at this comment thread. They're calling me a homewrecker. They think I broke up your marriage. You didn't break up our marriage, Monica said quietly, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. The marriage was already dead by the time Richard met you. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The honesty in her voice made Cassandra look up, and for a moment, the two women stared at each other across the wreckage of Richard's control over both their lives. He told me you were bitter, Cassandra said slowly. Vindictive. That you were trying to take him for everything he had in the divorce. Monica's laugh held no humor. I got half of nothing, Cassandra. Richard made sure all our assets were tied up in business investments I had no claim to. The apartment Emma and I live in, it's subsidized housing. The car I drove here, it breaks down twice a month. If I was vindictive, would I be playing piano for tips? The crowd around them had grown larger, and more phones were recording. Monica realized that every word she spoke now would be dissected by thousands of strangers. Her pain turned into entertainment for people she'd never meet. The talent agent stepped closer, his voice urgent. Monica, I really think we need to get you out of here before this gets completely out of hand. The offers are already starting to come in, but you need representation before you say anything else on camera. Monica looked around the restaurant, at the crowd of strangers celebrating her talent, at Richard's humiliated face, at Cassandra's growing understanding of what kind of man she was about to marry, at the money overflowing from the crystal bowl that represented more financial security than she'd had in months. In 24 hours, she would wake up to find herself the center of a national conversation about talent, marriage, and second chances. But first, she had to decide whether to run from the spotlight or step fully into it. Some moments change everything. This was one of them, and Monica had about 30 seconds to decide which direction her new life would take. The restaurant buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with fine dining and everything to do with witnessing something historic. Phones continued recording, strangers pressed closer for photos, and Monica stood at the center of it all like the eye of a hurricane. We need to go now, the talent agent urged, his hand gently touching her elbow. Before this becomes a complete circus. I have a car waiting outside, and we can discuss your options somewhere private. Her options? Richard's voice cut through the noise like a rusty blade. What options? She's a divorced mother with no money, no connections, and no experience in the entertainment industry. One viral video doesn't change reality. The agent's expression hardened. Sir, with all due respect, you clearly don't understand the power of social media in today's market. Your ex-wife just demonstrated world-class talent in front of cameras, and the internet has decided she's their new hero. Labels will be calling by morning. Labels. Cassandra looked up from her phone, where she was still reading increasingly harsh comments about her relationship with Richard. Like record labels. Among others, the agent confirmed. Streaming platforms, concert venues, television producers. Everyone wants to get in on a good comeback story, especially one with this kind of raw talent behind it. Monica felt dizzy. 20 minutes ago, she'd been counting $37 and wondering how to pay for Emma's school lunch. Now strangers were talking about record deals and television appearances like they were discussing the weather. Mom, the small voice cut through all the adult chaos like a knife through butter. Emma Richardson stood near the hostess station, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her 13-year-old face confused and worried. Emma. Monica's heart stopped. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Sarah's house. Sarah's mom saw the videos on Facebook. She drove me over because she was worried about you. Emma looked around at the crowd, the cameras, her father's red face. What's happening? Why is everyone recording you? Richard moved toward his daughter, but Emma instinctively stepped closer to Monica. The rejection was subtle but unmistakable, and it hit Richard harder than any public humiliation could have. Your mother decided to make a scene, Richard said, his voice strained. Turn our family business into internet entertainment. Emma's eyes flashed, Monica's eyes. Richard realized with a start. When had his daughter started looking at him like that? Like he was the enemy? Dad, I saw the video. Mom was amazing. Why are you being so mean about it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Around them, phones continued recording, capturing not just Monica's triumph, but her family's dysfunction for the world to analyze and judge. Do you protect your children from your battles? Or do you let them see the truth about who you really are? Monica knelt down to Emma's eye level, her voice gentle despite the chaos around them. Sweetheart, some people recorded me playing piano tonight, and it got shared on social media. That's why there are cameras here. Are you in trouble? No, baby. The opposite, actually. People like my music. Emma's face lit up. Does this mean you can play piano again? Like all the time? Like before Dad said it was too loud for the neighbors. The innocence of the question hit Monica like a physical blow. Emma remembered the music from before the divorce, before the apartment with thin walls and angry neighbors, before years of silence and sacrifice. Maybe, Monica said carefully. We'll see. The talent agent cleared his throat diplomatically. Mrs. Richardson, I don't want to pressure you, but we really should discuss this somewhere more private. The crowd is getting larger, and I'm worried about safety. He was right. The restaurant was well beyond capacity now, with people pressing against the windows, trying to see inside. The manager looked frantic, and the hostess had given up any pretense of managing the situation. Monica, Richard's voice carried a note of desperation she hadn't heard since their marriage started falling apart. Don't do this. Don't uproot Emma's life for some fantasy about being famous. You tried the music thing before, and it didn't work out. This is just a fluke, a momentary attention that will fade. It didn't work out before because you made sure it didn't work out, Monica replied, standing up to face him fully. Every audition I didn't take, every opportunity one turned down, every time I chose your comfort over my dreams, that wasn't failure, Richard. That was sacrifice. And I'm done sacrificing. Emma tugged on Monica's sleeve. Mom, what's he talking about? What auditions? The question was simple, but answering it would mean admitting to her daughter that she'd given up her dreams, that there had been another life possible if different choices had been made. Before you were born, Monica said carefully, I used to play piano professionally. I stopped when I married your father. Why? Another simple question with a devastating answer. Monica looked at Richard, at Cassandra, at the crowd of strangers recording their family's most intimate moments, at the talent agent waiting to offer her a different future. Because I thought being a wife and mother meant I couldn't be anything else. Emma's brow furrowed with 13-year-old logic. But Sarah's mom is a doctor and a mom. And Mrs. Peterson next door is a teacher and a mom. Why couldn't you be a piano player and a mom? The question hit Richard like a physical blow because it was the same question he'd never let Monica ask. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't failing. It's succeeding so completely that you can never go back to who you used to be. Monica looked at her daughter's earnest face, at the crowd of strangers who had somehow become invested in her story, at the talent agent offering her a future she'd stopped believing was possible. The weight of the decision felt enormous, but also strangely freeing. "You're right, Em," she said quietly. "I could have been both. I should have been both." Richard stepped forward, his voice taking on the patronizing tone she remembered from their marriage. "Monica, think about this logically. You're 38 years old. The music industry is for young people. Even if you get some offers now, how long will it last? What happens when a novelty wears off?" "I don't know," Monica admitted. "But for the first time in 15 years, I'm okay with not knowing." The talent agent's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with growing excitement. "Monica, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just got a call from the Tonight Show. They want you on tomorrow night." The restaurant fell silent, except for the sound of camera shutters and the distant traffic outside. Even Richard's mouth fell open. "The Tonight Show?" Emma whispered, her eyes wide. "Mom, that's like real TV." "It's very real TV," the agent confirmed. "And that's just the beginning. I got 3 record labels wanting to meet with you this week, a streaming special in development, and concert venues from here to New York asking about availability." Monica felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just about playing piano anymore. This was about stepping into a completely different life, one where strangers knew her name and cameras followed her around, and Emma would have to deal with having a famous mother. "What about school?" she asked, looking down at Emma. "What about your friends, your routine, your normal life?" Emma grinned. The first genuine smile Monica had seen from her in months. "Mom, my normal life is you working 3 jobs and still worrying about money. If people want to pay you to play piano, that sounds like a better normal to me." The wisdom in her daughter's words hit Monica like lightning. When had Emma become so perceptive about their struggles? When had her 13-year-old started worrying about adult problems? Cassandra spoke up for the first time in minutes, her voice small and uncertain. "Richard, maybe we should go. This isn't our business anymore." But Richard couldn't move. He stood frozen, watching the woman he'd spent years diminishing prepare to step into a spotlight that would make his own accomplishments seem small and petty by comparison. "You'll fail," he said finally, his voice empty of everything except defeat. "You'll get a few months of attention, maybe a year if you're lucky, and then you'll be back where you started." Except now Emma will have seen what it looks like when you crash and burn publicly. Have you ever had someone predict your failure so confidently that it actually motivated you to prove them wrong? Monica looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since walking into the restaurant. The man she'd once loved enough to sacrifice her dreams for now seemed smaller, more fragile, diminished by his need to tear down everyone around him to feel important. "You know what, Richard? Maybe I will fail. Maybe this will all disappear tomorrow, and I'll be back to playing piano for tips. But at least I'll know I tried." At least Emma will see her mother taking a chance instead of accepting defeat. She turned to the talent agent, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. "Mr. Chun, I'm interested in hearing those offers." The crowd around them erupted in applause. Not the polite appreciation of earlier, but genuine celebration. Strangers cheered for a woman they'd just met, invested in her success in a way that surprised even Monica. Emma threw her arms around Monica's waist, her voice muffled against her mother's shirt. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You sounded like an angel when you played." The simple honesty of it broke something loose in Monica's chest. Years of doubt, of accepting less than she deserved, of believing other people's assessments of her worth. For the first time since her wedding day, she felt like herself again. The talent agent smiled, pulling out his business card. "Why don't we start with a phone call tomorrow morning? I'll send a car to pick you up for the Tonight Show taping. We'll discuss everything else after America gets to hear your story." As Monica took the card, she noticed her hands weren't shaking anymore. Somewhere between the first note and the standing ovation, between Richard's cruelty and Emma's pride, she'd found something she'd lost years ago. The unshakable knowledge of her own worth. The cameras kept rolling as she and Emma walked toward the exit, the crowd parting like water to let them pass. Behind them, Richard sat alone at table 12, his engagement party forgotten, watching his ex-wife walk into a future that no longer included him at all. Tomorrow morning, Monica Richardson would wake up to find herself trending on social media, her phone filled with opportunities she'd only dreamed of, her life forever changed by one night when she remembered who she really was. But tonight, she was just a mother walking home with her daughter, humming softly under her breath, the melody of her new beginning already taking shape in the space between heartbeats. Monica woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing like an angry bee trapped in a jar. The screen showed 847 missed calls, 2,341 text messages, and notifications from apps she'd forgotten she had installed. Emma sat cross-legged on the bed beside her, scrolling through her tablet with the focused intensity of someone conducting important research. "Mom, you're on the news." Like the actual news. Channel 8, Channel 4, and that morning show with the blonde lady who always seems angry. Monica rubbed her eyes, trying to process the reality of waking up famous. Their tiny apartment looked the same. Peeling paint on the walls, secondhand furniture that didn't quite match, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. But everything felt different now. "What are they saying?" Monica asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Mostly that you're amazing and Dad is a jerk," Emma replied with the brutal honesty that only 13-year-olds could deliver. "But also that some lady from a record company is flying in from New York just to meet you." The talent agent's card sat on Monica's nightstand like a small rectangle of possibility. David Chun, Premier Entertainment. She'd Googled him at midnight. Legitimate, successful, representing artists she'd actually heard of. Not some scam artist preying on desperate people, but the real thing. Her phone rang, and Emma glanced at the screen. "It's him, the talent guy." Monica answered on the third ring, her voice still rough from sleep. "Hello." "Monica, thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you for hours. We need to talk now. Can I send a car to pick you up in 30 minutes? The urgency in his voice sent a spike of anxiety through her chest. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Too right. I've got 6 record labels in a bidding war, 3 television networks wanting exclusive interviews, and a concert promoter offering you a 20-city tour. We need to move fast before this gets completely out of control." Emma's eyes went wide, and she mouthed the words 20 cities with the reverence usually reserved for discussing unicorns or winning lottery tickets. "I don't understand," Monica said. "Yesterday I was playing for tips. Today you're talking about tours and record deals. This doesn't happen to real people." "Monica, listen to me carefully. Your video has been viewed 12 million times in 18 hours. 12 million. That's not internet famous. That's cultural phenomenon famous. The story has everything people love: talent, betrayal, redemption, a villain they can hate, and a hero they can root for." Through the thin walls of their apartment, Monica could hear her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, talking excitedly on her phone about that piano lady who lives next door. The surreal nature of her new reality hit her like cold water. Strangers around the world knew her story, but her own life still included wondering if she had enough quarters for the laundry machine. Do you ever wake up and discover your entire world has changed overnight? How do you process the kind of shift? "The car will be there in 25 minutes, David continued. "We're something nice, but not too fancy. Approachable, but professional. America is falling in love with your authenticity. Don't lose that." After hanging up, Monica stared at her closet. 3 worn blazers, 2 pairs of decent jeans, and a collection of thrift store finds that suddenly seemed inadequate for whatever her life was about to become. Emma appeared in the doorway, holding Monica's best dress, a simple black number she'd worn to job interviews. "Mom, you should wear this. You look pretty in it, and it doesn't have any holes." The practical assessment made Monica laugh despite her nerves. And what if this is all too much? What if I can't handle being famous? What if I mess it up and embarrass us both? Emma sat on the bed, her expression serious beyond her years. Mom, remember when I was scared to try out for the school play because I might forget my lines? Monica nodded. You told me that being scared means something matters to you. You said the only real failure is not trying when you get the chance. Emma's voice softened. This is your chance, Mom. The whole world is watching to see what you'll do with it. The wisdom of her daughter's words hit Monica square in the chest. Somewhere between divorce papers and survival mode, she'd forgotten her own advice about courage and chances. 23 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside their apartment building. Through the window, Monica could see a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, teenagers with phones, even Mrs. Patterson from 3B, who never talked to anyone. They're here for you, Emma said, peering through the blinds. Mom, people are here because they want to see you. Monica smoothed down her dress, grabbed her purse, and walked toward a future she couldn't have imagined 24 hours earlier. But before opening the door, she turned back to Emma. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Deal. Deal, Emma replied, grinning. Now go show them what you're made of. The Tonight Show studio felt like stepping inside a television screen. Everything brighter, sharper, and more intense than real life. Monica sat in the green room, her hands trembling as she watched other guests come and go, each one looking like they belonged in this world of professional makeup and casual celebrity. David paced beside her chair, his phone constantly buzzing with calls he answered in rapid-fire bursts of negotiation and scheduling. That was NBC. They want you for a Christmas special. And Warner Music just increased their offer by another $200,000. The numbers felt abstract, like he was discussing someone else's life. $200,000. Monica tried to remember what it felt like to count every dollar, to choose between gas and groceries, to lie awake at night calculating bills. That reality seemed both impossibly distant and dangerously close. A production assistant appeared in the doorway, young, energetic, wearing a headset and carrying a clipboard like a weapon. Monica, we're ready for you in makeup. Tonight's show tapes in 45 minutes, and you're the final guest. The makeup chair felt like a throne, and the woman working on Monica's face chattered about previous guests while she transformed tired divorce into television-ready glamour. You're going to be great. The audience loves comeback stories, and yours is already trending again today. Trending again? Your ex-husband gave an interview this morning. Channel 12 News. He's claiming you're using your daughter to gain sympathy, that the whole thing is a publicity stunt. The makeup artist paused, meeting Monica's eyes in the mirror. I hope you're ready to defend yourself, because he's making you sound pretty calculating. Monica's stomach dropped. Richard was still fighting, still trying to control the narrative even as it spun completely beyond his reach. What did he say exactly? That you planned the whole restaurant thing? That you knew he'd be there? That you deliberately caused a scene to get attention? He's painting you as manipulative and desperate. The familiar weight of Richard's accusations settled on Monica's shoulders like an old coat. Even from hundreds of miles away, he could still make her doubt herself, still make her question whether her motives were pure or selfish. David appeared beside the makeup chair, his expression grim. We need to talk about the interview. Richard's narrative is gaining traction online. Some people are starting to question whether your performance was staged. Staged? Monica's voice cracked. How could it be staged? I had $37 in my pocket and no idea he'd be there. I know that. You know that. But public perception can shift fast. And right now, there are two competing stories about who you really are. We need to get ahead of this. When someone tries to rewrite your story to make you the villain, how do you reclaim your truth? The production assistant returned, more urgent now. Monica, we really need to move. The host wants to do a quick pre-interview, and then you're on in 20 minutes. The walk from makeup to the stage felt like crossing a bridge between her old life and whatever came next. Studio lights blazed overhead. The audience murmured in anticipation. And somewhere in that sea of faces were people who had seen the video, chosen sides in her story, decided whether she deserved redemption or suspicion. The host, friendly, professional, media trained to make everyone feel comfortable, shook her hand with the practiced warmth of someone who interviewed celebrities daily. "Monica, great to meet you. We're going to keep this conversational, nothing too intense. Just tell your story, be yourself, and let the audience fall in love with you the way the internet did." "What if they don't?" Monica asked. "What if Richard's version of events makes more sense to people?" The host's smile became more genuine. "Monica, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've interviewed everyone from movie stars to politicians to internet sensations. You know what matters most? Authenticity. Truth has a sound to it that you can't fake. If you're telling the truth, people will hear it." The stage manager counted down from 10, and Monica found herself walking under lights, so bright they erased everything beyond the cameras. The audience applauded, warm, welcoming, curious, and she realized that for the next 8 minutes, she had a national platform to define herself. This was her chance to answer Richard's accusations, to explain her choices, to claim ownership of her own story. But as she sat down across from the host, one question echoed in her mind. Was she ready to tell the whole truth, even the parts that made her look imperfect? "So Monica," the host began, his voice carrying to millions of viewers across the country. "Let's start at the beginning. Tell us what really happened that night at the restaurant." Under the blazing studio lights, Monica felt like she was sitting in a fishbowl while the entire country peered in to judge her every word. The host leaned forward with practiced interest, and she could almost feel the weight of millions of viewers deciding whether to believe her or dismiss her as another internet fraud. "The truth is," Monica began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I went to that restaurant because I was desperate, not for attention, not for revenge, but for $30 to buy groceries for my daughter." The audience grew quiet, and Monica realized that admitting desperation, real, financial desperation, wasn't something celebrities usually did on national television. "I didn't know Richard would be there. I didn't plan anything. I just knew that Lou Bernardine had a piano, and I thought maybe, if I was lucky, they'd let me play for tips." She paused, remembering the weight of that moment. When you're choosing between gas money and your child's lunch, you do things that would have embarrassed you before. The host nodded, encouraging her to continue. "But your ex-husband is saying this was all calculated, that you knew he'd be there celebrating his engagement. Richard has spent 3 years telling anyone who'll listen that I'm worthless, manipulative, and bitter about our divorce. Now that people are finally hearing my side, he needs to maintain that narrative. Because if I'm not the villain in our story, what does that make him?" The words came out stronger than Monica had intended, and she saw something shift in the host's expression, recognition that this wasn't just an interview anymore, but a public settling of accounts. "Let's talk about your marriage. You gave up a promising music career to support Richard's ambitions. Looking back, do you regret that choice?" Monica considered the question carefully. This was dangerous territory. Too much bitterness would make her look vindictive. Too little would minimize the real cost of her sacrifice. "I regret that it was presented as an either-or decision. I regret believing that loving someone meant making myself smaller to make them feel bigger. But I don't regret Emma. I don't regret the years I had with her, even if they came at the cost of my dreams. And now those dreams are back. Record deals, concert offers, opportunities you thought were gone forever. How does that feel?" "Terrifying," Monica admitted, and the honesty of it made several audience members chuckle. "Yesterday, I was worried about paying the electric bill. Today I'm talking to you about record contracts. It doesn't feel real." The host smiled. "Well, let's make it a little more real. I understand you brought something to play for us tonight." Monica's heart jumped. She'd agreed to perform during the interview, but sitting at a piano on national television felt completely different from playing in a restaurant full of strangers. "I did. I thought maybe I could play the song that started all this, the one from that night. Before we hear it, I have to ask about the video that's been circulating today. Your ex-husband's interview, where he questions your motives. Has that been difficult to watch?" The question hit harder than Monica expected. She'd spent the afternoon reading comments from people who now suspected she was a fraud, a manipulative ex-wife playing victim for sympathy. Have you ever had your integrity questioned so publicly that strangers around the world formed opinions about your character? It's been heartbreaking, she admitted, because it means Richard would rather destroy my credibility than admit he was wrong about me. It means he'd rather make me look calculating and desperate than acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I actually do have talent worth celebrating. The audience murmured their approval, and Monica realized she'd found her voice. Not the careful, diplomatic tone she'd planned, but something rawer and more honest. The Richard you see in that interview is the same man who convinced me for 15 years that my dreams were selfish, that my music was just noise, that providing for Emma meant accepting that I'd never be anything more than his wife and her mother. He's not questioning my motives because he believes I'm manipulative. He's questioning them because he can't handle being wrong. The host let the statement hang in the air for a moment before speaking. And now, what's next for Monica Richardson? Now I play piano. I remember what it feels like to create something beautiful instead of just surviving something difficult. I show my daughter that it's never too late to try again, never too late to remember who you were before life convinced you to be someone smaller. The host gestured toward the piano that had been wheeled onto the stage during their conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Monica Richardson. As she walked to the piano bench, Monica caught a glimpse of the audience. Hundreds of faces looking at her with curiosity, hope, and the kind of investment that comes from seeing someone fight for their second chance. She sat down, placed her hands on the keys, and for a moment felt the same terror she'd experienced at Le Bernardin. But then she remembered Emma's words that morning. "This is your chance, Mom." The first notes of Clair de Lune filled the studio, but this version was different from the one she played that night. This one carried less pain and more hope, less desperation and more determination. This was the sound of a woman who had remembered her worth and refused to forget it again. 3 weeks later, Monica stood in the living room of their new apartment. Not luxury, but safe, clean, and big enough for Emma to have her own bedroom. Staring at contracts spread across a dining table they'd actually been able to buy instead of finding on the curb. The Tonight Show performance had changed everything again. The video of her playing Clair de Lune on national television had been viewed 40 million times. For record labels were still competing for her signature. Concert venues were booking her 18 months in advance. Emma burst through the front door, her backpack hitting the floor with the casual abandon of a teenager who no longer worried about disturbing downstairs neighbors. "Mom, guess what happened at school today?" "What?" Monica asked, though she braced herself. Fame, she was learning, had unexpected consequences for both of them. "Mrs. Rodriguez, my music teacher, asked if you'd come speak to her classes about pursuing your dreams, even when people tell you they're impossible." Emma's grin could have powered the apartment building. She said, "You're proof that talent doesn't have an expiration date." The request touched something deep in Monica's chest. A year ago, she would have been terrified to speak publicly about dreams and determination. Now, the idea of encouraging other people felt like the most natural thing in the world. "And there's something else," Emma continued, her tone shifting to something more serious. "Dad called the school today. He wants to change our custody arrangement." Monica's stomach clenched. She'd been waiting for this, for Richard to use her sudden success as ammunition in their ongoing battles over Emma's time and future. "What kind of changes?" "He wants more custody time. He told the counselor that your career is going to require too much travel, that I need stability he can provide." Emma's expression hardened in a way that reminded Monica of herself. "I told them I want to stay with you." The relief that flooded through Monica was immediately followed by guilt. Emma shouldn't have to choose sides, shouldn't have to defend her mother's choices to school counselors and court officials. Whatever happens with custody, you know that both your father and I love you, right? This isn't about you choosing between us." Emma sat down at their new table, her fingers tracing patterns on the wood surface. "Mom, can I ask you something honestly?" "Always." "Do you think Dad ever loved you? I mean, really loved you, not just liked having you around?" The question hit Monica like cold water. At 13, Emma was old enough to see patterns, to understand the difference between love and possession, between partnership and control. I think your father loved the version of me that made him feel important. The problem was that version required me to be smaller than I actually am. Emma nodded like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. At dinner last week, he spent the whole time talking about how your success is just temporary, how you'll come back down to earth soon. He seemed almost happy about the idea of you failing. The honesty in Emma's voice broke Monica's heart. Children shouldn't have to analyze their parents' marriages, shouldn't have to understand the difference between love and control at 13 years old. How do you protect your child from seeing the worst in someone they're supposed to love and respect? Your father is struggling with this situation, Monica said carefully. It's hard for him to watch me succeed at something he convinced both of us I was bad at. But you were never bad at it. You were incredible. I remember you playing before the divorce, before we moved to the apartment. You just stopped. Emma's voice grew quiet. Why did you stop, really? Monica considered how much truth a 13-year-old could handle, how much adult complexity she should share with her daughter. Because your father made me believe that my music was selfish, that spending time on piano meant taking time away from being a good wife and mother. It took me a long time to understand that those things didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Emma was quiet for several minutes, processing this information with the seriousness it deserved. Finally, she looked up at Monica with eyes that seemed much older than 13. Mom, promise me something. What's that? Promise me you won't stop playing again, no matter what happens with Dad, or custody, or anything else. Promise me you won't forget who you were just to make someone else comfortable. The request was simple, but Monica understood its weight. Emma was asking her to choose herself, to prioritize her own worth and dreams, even when it was difficult or inconvenient for other people. I promise, Monica said, and meant it completely. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Chun. Final contracts are ready. Warner Music wants to schedule your first recording sessions. Are you ready to make an album? Monica looked around their new apartment, at Emma doing homework at a table they owned, at the piano in the corner. Not a rental, not borrowed, but theirs, and realized that, ready or not, her new life was already happening. The only question now was whether she was brave enough to fully live it. 6 months after that night, at Le Bernardin, Monica Richardson stood backstage at the Kennedy Center, listening to a sold-out audience of 2,300 people calling her name. The little girl who had dreamed of Carnegie Hall was about to perform at one of America's most prestigious venues, but the path here had been nothing like she'd imagined at 7 years old. Emma stood beside her, now 14 and taller, wearing a dress they'd bought together instead of something from the thrift store. Mom, you should see out there. People have signs with your name on them. Actual signs, like you're a rock star. I'm terrified, Monica admitted, smoothing down the flowing black gown that had been selected by a stylist, another surreal addition to her life that still felt like playing dress-up in someone else's reality. Good terrified or bad terrified? Monica considered the question. Both, but more good than bad. The stage manager appeared, headset crackling with instructions from the sound booth. Monica, we're ready for you. House is packed. Energy is incredible, and we've got a surprise for you. Someone special in the audience tonight. What kind of surprise? Your old piano teacher from Alabama called our office last week. She flew up just to see you perform. She's in the third row. Mrs. Patterson from her childhood lessons. The woman who had first shown her that music could be a language, a way of speaking emotions that had no words. Monica felt tears threatening her carefully applied makeup. She must be 75 years old now, Monica whispered. She said to tell you, she always knew this day would come. Emma squeezed Monica's hand. See, even your teacher knew you were going to be famous someday. The first notes of the symphony orchestra began. Monica's debut album had been so successful that tonight's performance included a full orchestral arrangement of her songs. As she walked onto the stage, the applause was deafening, but what struck her most was the diversity of the crowd. Young people who'd found her through social media sat next to elderly couples who remembered when piano music was popular radio. Families with children, business executives, college students, all united by something she created. The piano, a concert grand Steinway that cost more than most people's houses. gleamed under the stage lights. Monica sat on the bench, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces waiting to hear her story in music. 6 months ago, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, I stood outside a restaurant with $37 in my pocket, wondering if anyone would let me play piano for tips. Tonight, I'm here with all of you, and I still can't quite believe it's real. The audience laughed, warm and appreciative. But this concert isn't just about my story. It's about second chances, about remembering who you are when life convinces you to be someone smaller. It's about the courage it takes to start over, and the people who love you enough to watch you try. She began with Claire de Lune, the song that started everything, but this version was different from both the restaurant performance and the Tonight Show appearance. This one was fuller, richer, backed by orchestra and informed by 6 months of remembering what it felt like to be valued for her talent instead of diminished for her dreams. As she played, Monica caught sight of familiar faces in the audience. David Chun, who'd become not just an agent, but a friend. The hostess from Loop Bernardine, who'd taken a picture with Monica at the Grammy nominations announcement. Mrs. Patterson from her childhood, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. And in the back, partially hidden by shadows, a figure she recognized with a jolt of surprise. Richard, alone, watching her command a stage in a way he'd never believed she could. When did someone who tried to make you smaller finally realize what they'd thrown away? The concert continued. Songs from her album, pieces from her childhood, new compositions that told the story of transformation and growth. For 90 minutes, Monica held the complete attention of thousands of people, weaving together melody and memory into something that felt both deeply personal and universally meaningful. During the final song, she looked directly at Emma in the wings, remembering the 13-year-old who had told her this was her chance, and she should take it. Now 14 and wise beyond her years, Emma had become her strongest supporter and fiercest protector, understanding in ways that surprised Monica that success meant responsibility to use your platform for good. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of strangers celebrating her journey, her music, her refusal to accept anyone else's assessment of her worth. As flowers were thrown onto the stage and calls for encore echoed through the venue, Monica realized that the scared woman who'd walked into Loop Bernardine no longer existed. She had been replaced by someone who understood that talent delayed is not talent denied, that dreams deferred can still come true, and that sometimes the best way to prove someone wrong is to live so fully and authentically that their small opinion becomes irrelevant. Later, at the after-party, Monica found herself approached by a young woman with nervous eyes and calloused fingertips, the signs of a pianist. Ms. Richardson, I wanted to thank you. I'm 25, and I gave up music 3 years ago because my boyfriend said it was a waste of time. After seeing your story, I started playing again. I just got accepted to graduate school for music therapy. Monica smiled, understanding that this was why her story had resonated with millions of people. Not because it was unique, but because it was universal. The story of remembering who you are when others convince you to be less. What's your name? Monica asked. Sarah. Sarah Chun. No relation to David, she added with a laugh. Sarah, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me when I was 25. Your dreams don't have expiration dates, but your courage might. Don't wait as long as I did to remember what you're capable of. As the party continued around them, Monica realized that her greatest success wasn't the record sales or the sold-out concerts or the Grammy nominations. It was becoming the person she wished had existed when she needed encouragement, becoming the voice that told other people their dreams mattered, their talents deserved respect, and their second chances were always possible. Outside, in the DC night, Richard sat in his car in the parking garage, staring at his phone screen, showing video clips from Monica's performance. Beside him, Cassandra, now his wife, scrolled through social media posts celebrating Monica's success. She really is talented, Cassandra said quietly. I can see why you fell in love with her. Richard didn't respond, but for the first time in months, he wasn't trying to diminish Monica's achievements. He was finally beginning to understand what he'd lost when he convinced the most gifted person he'd ever known that she had nothing valuable to offer the world. Some people realized too late that the person they tried to keep small was actually the biggest thing that ever happened to them. Back inside the Kennedy Center, Monica held Emma close as the crowd slowly dispersed, both of them understanding that this night marked not just the peak of her comeback, but the beginning of whatever came next. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Emma whispered. "Not because you're famous now, but because you remembered who you always were." And in that moment, surrounded by the lingering echoes of applause and the warmth of her daughter's love, Monica Richardson finally understood that redemption wasn't about proving other people wrong. It was about proving yourself right. The keys to redemption, she realized, had always been in her hands. She just needed to remember how to play them.